Ron Ambrose said, "Hey, I'm confused about box-pleat kilts. I can talk. I'm confused about box-pleat kilts. Are they actually traditional? I heard they were military, but I don't know if that's really true. Does anyone wear them? And if so, who and where?"
Okay.
So what's the deal with box-pleat kilts?
Box-pleat kilts.
What is a box-pleat kilt?
I'm so glad you asked. Why don't we bring in the photo of a box-pleat kilt? There we go. Look at that right there.
I got this question yesterday, so this is one of the instances where I wanted to have a visual aid. So here you go.
So box-pleat kilt is what's on screen here. If you'll notice, it's a box pleat. It's essentially the type of plate that's used a lot on like cheerleader skirts and stuff like that, where it is knife pleated on both sides. So it goes both directions back and forth. Generally speaking, when you have a box pleated kilt, you're only using about 4 yards of cloth. You're not using 5, 6, 7, 8 yards of cloth because it's too much. If you could, Jordan, bring up the white photo with the sideways look at it. There you go. So this is the difference between a knife pleat and a box pleat. I often describe a box pleat as Z shapes back to back to back. So this is, looking at a kilt as if it was on the table. You'll notice the Z and then S and then Z and then S. So the pleat meets on the top and in the back, where a knife pleated kilt just has a sharp edge on one side and all the pleats wrap the same direction. Because they all wrap the same direction, you can have 6, 7, 8, 9, 57 yards, whatever you need, in a kilt. Whereas a box pleat, if the depths of the pleat, what is essentially on the bottom of the picture here, if those meet and it's too much fabric, they tend to overlap. So it gets too deep on the insides, and then you end up with a military box plate is essentially what we call it. So these are the differences. Now, what are the advantages to a box plate? Essentially, the one advantage that some people have pointed out for a box plate is there's less fabric in it. There's only about 4 yards in a box pleated kilt. So, and if you think of it this way, you have 1 yard for your under apron, another yard for your over apron, roughly speaking, and you have 2 yards in the back. So it's more balanced compared to, let's say, like an 8-yard kilt, where an 8-yard kilt, you have 1 yard, 2 yards, and then in the back, you have about 6 yards. So it kind of, pulls down in the back because there's a lot more weight in the back of the kilt than there is in the front. So it's a lighter and it's a little bit more balanced while you're physically wearing it. So that's an advantage to wearing it. Disadvantage, I would say, is it doesn't get the momentum-y swing, the swish that you have on an 8-yard kilt when you're walking, because there's less fabric in it, and because the pleats go both directions, it tends to be a little bit more cylindrical, kind of waddle around you than the proper bouncy swish thing.
The proper bouncy swish.
Yes, we may need to insert videos here of
bouncy swish. Lord Bouncy Swish.
Yes,
at
indeed.
your service.
Lord Bouncy Swish'em the third.
Just broke.
Yeah.
I got a great image in my head now of like a cartoon character for that. A monocle. Lord Bouncy Swish.
I love cartoons.
I say.
It's the Monopoly guy, but with a kilt on.
Done. Consider it done. I love playing with retro cartoons. If you look at any of the memes I make using Fallout art, you know this. Yeah, I get the impression that that's basically who wears them. I think people who want to look a little bit different, or who want a kilt that is lighter for summer, that has definitely been made known to me. And it was more common, it seems, back in the 19th century when they were experimenting with how to make kilts and make them look good, as the revival suits started to develop and people were tinkering and stuff through the first half of the 19th century. And I think that as we've mentioned before, the Victorians basically invented the 8-yard kilt. And knife pleating was also popular because as you're starting to have regiments wearing tailored kilts, you need it to be easier to mass produce them and easier to fit, especially if you had hand-me-down kilts, which is a topic we've talked about, especially concerning World War I. Look for the video. So basically, knife pleats were more efficient from that standpoint for making uniformity and ease of mass production for the military. And more pleats, more fabric meant more of a swish. So your bagpipers look more impressive. Or if you're in any kind of a capacity where you're trying to show off, you look more impressive. When you walk, you look more impressive. So for those reasons, knife pleats became much more standard. Box pleats are kind of cool. I'm not sure how much I'm personally into it, but I know that they have, like you said, they have some advantages.
Now, here's a question for you. I'm challenging and I'm adding an asterisk because I am curious and I don't know the exact date off the top of my head.
I may not either. But...
when did kilts go from 4 or 5 yards to closer to 8 yards? Was it Victorian times, or did it just the yardage increased and that's kind of more standard now?
I get the impression that the 8 yards really started to come into their own in like the 1850s, 1860s, or later.
I was going to say later.
Yeah. It could be even, I want to say like 1880s for sure.
Yeah.
But
okay,
probably 1860s would be a reasonable guess. I am sometimes flabbergasted by how early things are compared to how early I think they are. But in this case, I think that's the case. I'm looking at Mac because I'm hoping he's going to be like, yeah, that's what I heard.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm actually in between a few things.
My apologies. I know you have other
I only
work
caught
to
the end of that.
Earlier military kilts, early kilts, period, were lower yardage. They started off as 4 yards, ish, 5 yards maybe, and over time the amount of fabric has grown. I know when, like the Black Watch wanted to pleat it to the stripe, they had to pleat. They needed a little bit more cloth to be able to do that. And that's when it started increasing the amount of cloth. So the question becomes, when did it standardize, so to speak, on 8 yards versus like 6 or 7 yards?
When was this Black Watch pleat to the stripe thing that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to speak incorrectly, so I'm not going to say here because we're live.
We can look up some notes and put them here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know what the government was what the Crown was issuing for the troops in the colonies.
Okay. So like
if that's if that's when some of the changes started.
Yeah.
There, because I know there were some changes. I'm trying to remember what.
Well, when did tailored kilts start?
Oh, well, tailored kilts earlier than the knife pleating thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's like late 17th century.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mid 17th century.
But I'm trying to remember.
Because you have the walking kilt, you have the short kilt, the walking kilt developing then, and then people started to tailor them more. And then you have, like I said, the period of a lot of experimentation with Highland revival.
Yeah. I'm just trying to remember what the guys at Fort Ty had said to me when we were talking to them about different things.
If you don't know, it's okay.
Nothing's coming back to me right now.
So the one thing that I'll point out as well, when kilts started to evolve out of the great kilt and started being tailored, you had A, lower yardage kilts, B, knife pleated kilts weren't the only thing that was done. Box pleated kilts, can you see pleating? There's a historical example of that, or reverse I guess regular can you see, not reverse can you see. So there's different examples of the kilt. And it kind of, over time, just, when tailors just wanted to play with it. And, hey, I want to do this type of playing. I want to do that type of playing. Hey, I want my kilt to be different than my friend's kilt. So make this one like this. Yep. And, it's just an individual offering a service, offering something that other people don't have, and playing with it and letting it evolve. Now, at some point, it was kind of standardized on regular knife pleating. And and in the 1920s, by that point, I would say for the most part, it was knife pleating.
Absolutely.
Period. It's a lot easier to do, and for the most part, box pleated kilts weren't really a thing. They kind of fell out of fashion and out of usage. It wasn't until the, I believe, 1980s with a gent named Bob Martin, where he started saying like, no, I want to do something different with the kilts that I am making. And he started making box pleated kilts again. And then Matt Newsom kind of picked up the mantle from Bob Martin and, wrote an addendum to Barb Tewksbury's book about, making box pleated kilts. So it's kind of been a little bit of a revival for more historical styles. And I know there's some people now who still, kind of do the ties on the kilt, or are doing specifically historical styles as individual kilt makers, as throwbacks to, I want these historical styles to live again. And that's been cool to see. Even mills doing historical stuff, like House of Edgar with, the Culloden tartan and all these old historical tartans. Mm-hmm. You're going to say something.
I was going to ask, what about the double box and the military box pleat?
Lady Crystal does the double box pleat. I don't know if that's a historical style.
The military box pleat, how far back does that go, or is that
military box pleat? Mac might be able to speak to it. It's essentially a box pleat, but one side is as deep as the pleat, and the other side is kind of a knife. It's kind of a hybrid between a knife plate and a box pleat.
Well, what period is that?
Fun to do up. Sorry.
And of course, if you talk to military, living historians, some will say like, no, all the military kilts were pleated this way, or with this type of pleat, or that type of pleat. And a lot of it was it depends on who made it for the regiment, or each regiment had a different type. Yeah,
it all depends on your contractor.
Yep.
What was your original thing you said there was when did that start?
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head. But someone did bring up in the comments the Scottish Tartan Museum in Franklin.
Yes.
As a good source for some of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So it's ultimately a lot of the cool stuff here is the nuance. A lot of people look at Highlandware as kind of a monolith and don't think of it as having evolved over time. And they're just taking, this is what it is today, or looking at snapshots in time. But you have to remember that these things kind of evolved through fashion. It's evolved slowly, much more slowly than regular fashion, but things have come in and gone out and come in and gone out, and it's gone in cycles. But it's not like neon colors from the 1980s becoming popular 25 years later or 35 years later, and then the 70s bell bottoms coming in. It's not shorter circles of fashion. It's much bigger loops of fashion, but it all comes back around. And I love when people want to make sure that they're still doing this particular thing from 150 years ago so that it still lives and that people remember it's not just an artifact, shoved in the back closet of a museum somewhere. Here's some actual physical examples of recreations of that thing to make sure that it still lives on.
I'll argue that economics plays a part also. I mean, even back to the 18th century, the Highland regiments were noted for their uniforms being more costly than other groups, other units. So, and when you get into the zenith of the empire and the wealth of the empire showing off, and we want our troops to look really freaking impressive because it's part propaganda, you're investing more in the uniforms. So yeah, of course you're going to put more fabric in the kilts so they look better on parade, because you got to impress the locals and you got to impress the people in the colonies. So more brass, more bling, bigger swords. More. But so I think that's a factor also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have some dominions that are having to raise their own money to fund their uniform projects. So
and getting pissed off about that too.
Yeah. So you have that all the way around.
Yeah. Let me bring this back to the original question though. Would you recommend a Box-Pleat Kilt to someone now?
Not as their first kilt.
Okay.
But I would recommend it as if you have 3. Sure. Do something different. You don't always have to be the exact same the exact same style kilted all the time. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the question that I have for you people out there. Box-pleated kilts are something that Mac has done on occasion, Casey has done on occasion, I've done on occasion.
I have one.
But it's not something that we readily offer. Are box-pleated kilts something you would wear? Is that something you would want to see a particular kilt company, maybe have on their website? Maybe should we?
Should we
not?
Well, if it's less fabric, it would be cooler.
Correct. It's more labor.
It could be.
So that's pain in the butt.
Okay, but I'm thinking from a consumer standpoint. If somebody want, I see it as people wanting it because they want to be different, or because they want it for hot weather.
Yeah.
Like the linens, because we just launched a linen jacket and vest set, so I could see maybe appealing to people like that.
I know we've got a few kilt makers over there that love making them. So
Okay.
Are you being sarcastic?
no, I'm actually being.
Oh, they
serious.
actually like
They've
making
been
box
they've been
loves
bugging
it.
me like they're like we want more box pleats, and I'm like
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So
So-
tell us if it's something we should offer, I guess.
Yeah. Tell us in the comments. Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Boy, did we rabbit hole on that
Yep.
one.
Just a bit.
We never do such a thing.
No, especially not about military history. No, not us.
Never. Sorry for nerding out so much in that answer, guys. I hope you at least enjoyed it a little bit. Let me know what it comes down to for you when choosing a kilt model. Is it practicality or is it the tradition that you're going after? Let us know down in the comments. And if you want to see all of the kilts that we offer, maybe box pleat, maybe not, you can check it out on our website, usakilts.com.